Welcome to this part in our ongoing chord tutorial. This week we're going to talk about altered chords. As you know, a chord is made up of 3 notes or more. They're typically made up in intervals of thirds, a C, up a third to E, and up a third to G. As shown here, they do not necessarily have to be placed in exact order, and sometimes notes can be doubled. We end up with a C chord. That's a basic chord. This is voiced slightly different than a straight intervals. In this example, we show a B flat added. That makes it a 7th chord. When I'm talking about altered chords, we're talking about adding notes that aren't typically there, like an F sharp in here instead of an F. First one we'll show you is a C7 with a flat 9. Ninth of the chord is a D, so we flatten it. D flat. That's where we get our altered chord. We leave the B flat in for the C7. Can add the E in to give it that major feel. Sometimes it's left out. Sometimes, as long as you have 3 notes or more, you have the chord. But sometimes you need certain notes, especially the third, to give you the flavor. You can see here the different chord symbols. When we add an altered note, we would go a flat 9 after C7 that's in here. And of course, the chords can be transposed anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be just C7. Here's an example where we're going to transpose it up using Sibelius's transpose feature by interval. We'll go up a third, and we'll end up with an E7 flat 9 chord. And Sibelius is nice in changing the chord symbol for you. It's almost always you have the chord symbol altered part in parentheses. That's a good clue if you see that in a chord symbol chart that it's an altered chord. In addition to altered chords like this, we can add notes to the chord. Normally C, E, and G would be a C chord, but let's say we add a note that's outside of the third pattern, but it's not going up, like C, E, G, B, D, F. Then we get to A. Here we just add the A to it. And since that's 6 notes higher than the C, we call it a C6 chord. That's become pretty standard notation. In addition to adding the 6th of a chord, for example, we might add another note to the chord that doesn't follow the typical pattern C, E, G, B, D, F, A. In this case, we'll add in a 9th to the 6th. That gives us what's known as a C6/9 chord, or just typically said C69. You can see here one example. We're leaving out the E here, so it's a little harder to tell it's a C major chord, but that's one typical voicing. Here's an example of where we throw in the E. You notice the chord symbol, instead of being like just written straight C69, they do it like 6/9 as in a fraction. It's a typical way of writing this chord. And there we have the E, the A, the D, and the C. You notice this is almost made up. Instead of a chord being made up of thirds, it's being made up of fifths. The D to the A to the E. And here's another voicing of that chord. C, G, D, and A. The D is the 9th. The A is the 6th. We also have something known as suspended chords. Often written C and then in parentheses sus4 is how that's typically said. Sometimes they leave out the parentheses for this, and I've even seen the chord symbol written to say C4. I don't care for that myself, but you do run across that every once in a while. Here's an example of where we take the C chord, but we are going in order. C, E, G, B, D, and then F would be the usual, but we're altering it. So we now have an F sharp instead. And because that's the 11th, as you count straight up, it would be called a C9, which is the D is the 9, C9, and then we're altering it by making it sharp 11. And as you see, we put the sharp 11 in parentheses to make it easier to read. You could alter just about any of the notes in the chord. Here we have the 13th added, but with the F sharp still altered, so it's a C13 sharp 11. That's one of the more interesting sounding chords. In addition to adding, let's say like we did with the 6th and adding the 9th, it's become common, and especially in popular music in recent years, to add in a D to a C chord. That's the 9th of the chord, but it's also the 2nd. I think it's typically called a C2 chord because you're adding the 2nd of the chord rather than going up C, E, G, B, and then D, which would make it a 9th chord. So sometimes you'll see it C suspended 2nd, or C sus 2, Sometimes it's marked just as C2, but here you go. Here's what it looks like here. Or C add 2 is another way to put it. I've run across quite a bit of debate as to whether you call it a C2 chord, a C add 2, or a C suspended 2. In this Sibelius program, it's set up right now to make it an add 2 if you put a 2 in there. And another chord that sometimes guitarists call a power chord, it's a C5 chord, which technically isn't a chord because there's only 2 notes in it, but it's an open fifth. And that's it for this time. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.